Tom, what inspired you to start diving?
Well, like a lot of people from the 50s, it was sea hunt. That was the one big inspiration. But before that, I used to go up to the big swimming pool there, and I grew up in Richland, Washington. And they had a big swimming pool, 12 foot deep, and one of the lifeguards periodically would go down with this bell on his head with a compressor and just a bucket, and go down and clean off the bottom of the pool. And I used to sneak in. The pool wasn't open at the time. It was earlier in the day. And I would sneak in there and just sit there and watch him. And I was just absolutely amazed at breathing underwater and being underwater. It just amazed me. And that inspired me to a degree, and sea hunt inspired me. But then when I was 14 years old, I was working in a grocery store with my mom one summer, and a couple of the guys, the older guys that were real old, like they were 17, 18, 19, something like that, they had read this article in a sports magazine or a outdoor magazine about some divers who had gone up to a lake, summer lake, spent the week there with their families, but they were scuba diving around the marina, and they were picking up stuff that people dropped, and they ended up making enough money to pay for their vacations. And I thought to myself, you know, I think I want to be an underwater treasure hunter. And now that was in 1959, and I started becoming an underwater treasure hunter in 1959. I'm still an underwater treasure hunter, wanting to become an underwater treasure finder.
Yeah, right.
Someday. So anyway, that's what inspired me and got me going. I just love the underwater world and aquariums and fish and that.
That's great. Did you have any early diving mentors, Tom?
Mentors? I think I read the Jacques Cousteau books, and The Silent World by Jacques Cousteau, and I think much like you said before, that at those times there weren't a lot of divers to go to for mentorship, but the writers that wrote about it, and of course Lloyd Bridges and Zale Perry on Sea Hunt, they were quasi-mentors, I guess.
Sure.
But that was in the early years. I'm going to have to skip, kind of fast forward a little bit, because Spence, you were my primary mentor. So you know that. And still are.
What was early instruction and equipment like in your mind?
The equipment that I started diving with was a single hose regulator. You'd mentioned two hoses, but this was an Aquamatic single hose regulator, and a galvanized scuba tank and a harness, mask and fins, and that was it. And I was diving in a rock quarry, so I didn't need a weight belt. When I finally started diving with wetsuits and I had to go to a weight belt, that was the only other things that I added to that original paraphernalia. And it was pretty easy. I've lived through the evolution of an awful lot of innovations in diving, with the pressure gauges, buoyancy compensators, dry suits, and octopus regulators, safe seconds, whatever you want to call them. The story that I like to share as far as the evolution of some of the equipment is, I don't know what the mindset was and what the motivation was, but at some period of time somebody decided, and I think it was John Gaffney with NASDS, decided that he didn't like buddy breathing. He didn't want to buddy breathe anymore. He wanted to have a second regulator. Instead of buddy breathing with somebody, you take your regulator out of your mouth, or you hand them a different regulator, so you came up with a safe second.
Right.
Well, one of the manufacturers, could have been Scuba Pro, I don't know, but one of the manufacturers looked at that and said, wow, we can sell more gear. So we'll just add another second stage to it, not a problem. And what do we have to do? Go to engineering? Engineering says, no problem, we just drill a hole here, tap it, thread it, put a hose in there, voila, you've got it. And what happened, however, was nobody from the engineering department talked to the educational guys to find out how are they going to teach it and what is going to be. This is a life-saving, emergency, stress-related piece of equipment. And I don't know that they ever talked to anybody and said, let's develop a piece of equipment that is standardized so that everybody is taught the same way to do it. It's one way, and that's the way, and it's standardized so that it becomes conditioned response. I kind of relate that to driving a car. You can go to any place in the world, rent a car at an airport, and drive off. You could be on the left side of the road, the right side of the road, the left side of the car, the right side of the car. The accelerator and brake are always in the same relationship to each other. Any car in the world. It's always the accelerator and brake, because that's an automatic response. But in diving, we've got an emergency technique that is inconsistent. When you've got a second stage, an extra second stage on your regulator, should you take the one out of your mouth and give it to the buddy that wants air, and then you pick the other one up and put it in your mouth? And some people say, no, you keep that in your mouth and you give this one. Okay, what about the regulators that go on the buoyancy compensator inflators? You can't give that one to them, and if you do, you lose control of buoyancy. So you have to put that one in your mouth and give them the one there. So it's inconsistent. That's always been a pet peeve of mine. And where in the equipment development didn't coincide with education, and so that's my pet peeve of the day. Of the decade.
Tom, did you ever invent something or create something or build something in diving that you used that you either felt was a modification or an improvement on some of the gear that you were using?
Spear guns. Yeah. Took we would modify the spear guns to, instead of having 2 or 3 slings, rubber slings to propel the spear, we would modify the head and then put one big heavy
banana rubber, right?
Yeah,
we used to call them, right?
On there, and that rubber sling. But boy, I tell you, you had to really work at loading it.
Yes, you did.
But you only had one to load instead of 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And that was probably it. I made backpacks, Hawaiian-style hook backpacks as opposed to straps. I made those. But I can't think of anything else that I actually did. We created ways once we started getting more hoses for different purposes, pressure gauge, octopus regulator, dry suit inflator. You can have a dry suit inflator and a BC inflator. So you've got a bunch of hoses. Come up with ways of configuring those hoses so that you could get out of the equipment fast. I think an educational technique that I developed that I liked and I would still teach if I were teaching is especially in cold water diving where we're wearing hoods And the face mask, if you take the mask off and try to put it back on after you put your gloves on and you're in the water, if you have a hood that's nice and tight and keeps your head warm, it's hard to get that face mask back on. So what I would do, and I taught this and I had my instructors teach it, is students, when you come to the pool, the first thing you do is get your face mask all rinsed out real good with soap, rinsed out so it won't fog. Put your face mask on. Once you get it on and sealed and everything, now go put all your equipment together. And you assemble the regulator, the BC, everything, put it in the water, put everything together with your face mask on. It was the first on, last off. Face mask comes off last. It doesn't come off and throw to the bottom of the boat for the white belt to land on. You know, and so that was one of the techniques that I came up with, and it was mainly a practical thing because I found that it worked well for me.
Yes.
You know?